Susie and Melanie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. We can start with quick introductions about yourself, and also do mention, in case people are interested in learning more about you, how they can exactly reach you and the type of things that you otherwise engage in with companies in terms of consulting. Yeah, over to you, Susie.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for having us and excited to have this conversation today. I do love technology that we're all the way across the world from each other and that we're having this conversation. I am Susie Silver. I use she, her pronouns. And I am a senior consultant and innovation strategist on the team at the Diversity Movement, which Melanie and I are on the same team at the company. A little bit more about myself. I'm a certified diversity executive. And I joined the diversity movement in February of 2021 after consulting in the DEI space on my own since 2015. I actually started my own company called With Pride Consulting that really focused at the time on LGBTQ plus inclusion in the workplace and in educational settings. And then the work expanded and expanded into all different things DEIB and landed myself at the diversity movement. In addition to the DEI work I do, I'm an artist, I'm a painter, and I was a public educator, so public school here, and I taught art for almost 18 years. So there was a lot of overlap of things that I did, but really I'm so excited that I'm on the team at the diversity movement and really believe in the work that we do. So Melanie, I'll turn it to you.
All right. Thanks, Susie. Yes, Susie is my partner at work. I have been at the diversity movement for about a year and a half. I am a senior consultant at the diversity movement. I started my career as a television news journalist, was a news anchor for more than 20 years, and Emmy nominated journalist, and then moved out of that space to the marketing space where I was a director of video production as well as professional development, where I did a lot of different trainings from media trainings to presentation training, workplace communications, crisis communications, and really felt it was important to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices into those trainings and became a certified diversity executive. Um, and so now I do all of those trainings that I did before in the marketing space, but have incorporated also things like inclusive language and unconscious bias into those trainings, generational diversity, gender, excuse me, gender and racial equity, things like that, that are really important when it comes to making sure that your business is successful. One thing about the diversity movement that I love, and we always try to explain to people, is that for us, it's not about just, this kumbaya moment. It's not a, like to have. It would be great to have diversity, equity, inclusion. It's really a must have in order for your business to be successful. So
Yeah.
that's sort of
Got it.
my in
Got
a
it.
nutshell.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Susie and Melanie. But very interesting there, Melanie. You transition from something else to sort of land or you create your space in being a senior consultant at DEI. Can you talk more about that? I think there are a lot of people out there who might be transitioning to this space and would get to learn a lot from your book. So, can you talk a little more about that? How did you exactly transition? Why did you exactly transition, and how are you finding it here? What are the changes and all that?
What's really interesting is that it wasn't planned that way. Like I didn't, when I was in the news industry, I didn't think, one day I'm going to be in the DEI space. It just sort of happened that way because I've always been passionate about being inclusive, and diversity, equity, inclusion has always been something that's sort of ingrained in me. And then when I left television, I really left television because it isn't a very family friendly industry. I worked a lot, and my kids had a nanny and all of that. And I really wanted to be home more with my children and have more of quote unquote regular life. But what happened is when I was in the marketing space, I worked for a company called Walk West, and inside Walk West, which was the marketing space, diversity, equity, inclusion was born from that company. So it was really just a transition that I had that came more naturally because of where I was working. But really, it made sense because anyone who's ever worked in the news industry knows it is not very DEI friendly. right? When you think about being inclusive and diversity, it's really not that way. It's moving more toward that way. As a matter of fact, one of the number one stations here where we're located in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the United States, we actually went there to, I trained them. It was interesting to leave television and go back to a TV station and train them on diversity, equity, inclusion, which wasn't the case back in the day, right? So it's actually that even that industry, which is notoriously exclusive when it comes to how people treat each other, right? It was a very brutal industry in that people talk to each other any way that they wanted to, right? You racially, it was like, okay, you had to have only a certain amount of racial diversity depending on who your audience is. But I will say that I have stories from when I was in television that are awful, right? Like, just one example is I was working in Louisiana, which is a state in the United States that is very humid. Okay. And I have naturally curly hair. And so when I'm out reporting, I could feel my hair growing, right? It was getting bigger and bigger from the humidity. And my general manager, who's over the whole TV station, came down and said to me that my hair needed to be straighter, right? That, and you think about how that makes you feel. He wanted my hair, and he told me this, as straight as Ann Curry. Well, Ann Curry was a news anchor at the Today Show who was Asian, right? Well, I'm African American. So asking a black woman to get her hair as straight as an Asian woman is really not inclusive, right? But
Right.
that wasn't terribly uncommon. Make your hair straighter, to the point where some women had to wear a wig because their hair was so damaged from trying to pull it and make it straight and make it acceptable, right? That their hair fell out.
Right.
Now we are moving in a direction. This is where I'm saying that DEI is so impactful. Now we're seeing Black women with their natural hair on television. They're wearing braids, they're wearing twists, their hair is natural. That's a huge movement, right? And some people will say, well, that doesn't matter, but it does. How you feel about yourself, your
Right.
health, your stress level, and people who are watching you at home are seeing a reflection of themselves. So, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that sort of movement may seem small for some people, but
Right.
for others, it's life changing.
Correct. No, no, very well said, Melanie. Also, Susie, if you can throw in your insights into, the starting of what is DEIB, and we've heard Melanie's take on why this is important for people to sort of feel comfortable in their own skin, to being comfortable who they are, and that is when the best comes out. That is one
Mhm.
take. Why do you think it is important? But even before, why do you think it is important? How should people who are very freshly getting into it, a region like India, which houses probably one of the largest skilled workforce, has absolutely no laws. We will come to laws later, but it doesn't necessarily have laws governing how this should be run. Companies might have adopted this, or might have a position such as a DEI lead within the company for namesake, right? There's not a lot of action that is happening, and hence the education is less. So for them, Susie, if you can just uh, you know not define, but yeah, in true sense, what is the true essence of incorporating this culture, if you can throw some light on that.
Yeah, so I could talk for a long time about this. I'll start and then Melanie, we can, um, please add as well. So, first and foremost, it starts with each of us. It starts with our own reflection, learning. Sometimes it's unlearning something that we have known our whole lives and may feel challenged by, uh, to recognize that this is a journey. It's not an end destination. And I think sometimes, especially around business and, like you said, the namesake of a position, and are we going to do a policy or a class or what it is, there we really need to start with ourselves first. then we need to understand how important this is to the business or to the group, because as you just mentioned, when we do feel as all humans, right? Sometimes we get so loud, in this noise, so to speak, that we miss the point. It's distracting. Melanie and I talk about the distractions quite often. So that's why it is good to come into ourselves, continually reflect, whether that's on our language, those are our experiences we haven't had, our biases. I mean, it's a continual reflection that people just in this world, let alone, of course, in business, it's a responsibility. It's an accountability as well for us. And then going into, the business sense of it, when we feel safe, I always say seen, safe, heard, amplified, you can concentrate on what you are hired to do. And not only that part of what you are hired to do, you usually become more creative. You are
Mhm.
more willing to take a risk. You feel
Correct.
supported to mess up and make a mistake, and there's not going to be anything negative. It's going to be looked at as an opportunity for growth. So it's a mindset that we want people to be in, recognizing nobody's perfect. We are all going to mess up. It's a continual journey, and that's the humanness of it. And then Melanie, as you mentioned about the diversity movement, and what we will say, we want us to all be great people in this world, and that is a big yes in my book. And then we put an and, not a but, and this is important for business. It's important how we hire. It's important how we retain people. It's important in the policies or healthcare, depending on the country you're in. Sometimes, in the United States, that's really important to us, and some other countries in the world have given healthcare, and that's something you don't have to worry about in the workplace. But advancement for or opportunity for advancement, excuse me. Depending on, it could be gender, race,
You're right.
all kinds of different things. So there's the reason I'm bouncing around here is because there really is a lot to think about. Now, the last thing I'll say, and I'll pause, Melanie, thinking about organizations and where to start, or if they're in this beginning journey, really look at your individual organization. What happens a lot is that companies will compare themselves to other companies, even companies that are like them. And that almost never works because this is about you as a business, you as a growing sustainable force in this world, as a business, you as a person, you as your team. It is very unique to each individual organization. So that's something to think about. Hey, we're in this unique journey that is ours. Can we look to others to gain insight? Absolutely. But our journey is going to be different than everybody else's. And then something that is important, of course, education is important, but DEI does not equal training. DEI has some training in it. And I'll pause because I can get really specific here with, assessment and things to look at. We can talk about that. But one of the main things is that your top leadership is bought in. If they're not bought in, that's also not going to work. Now, bought in means they're willing to put time, effort, and resources towards this. Give leaders and people that are part of this work time. Give them time. We see a
Right.
lot of issues with, oh, we've hired a DEI position, or oh, we have a council or a group, and it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, nothing's happened. Well, really, we have the small wins, which we should celebrate. But the longevity and the sustainability is what you're going for. We're talking 3 to 5 years. That's a realistic commitment. And it's not to say other things, it will be silent and nothing is happening in those other years. Of course they will be, month to month, I'm sure. But that top leadership buy-in, our own personal accountability and reflection, the recognition it's an ongoing journey. We're human and we're going to mess up, and have a culture that is okay. Those are some of the things that people can, think about, because I also think, and then ending, a lot of people enter this space already feeling like they're wrong or that they've done something bad. And a lot of us don't know what we don't know. So it's an opportunity to really learn and shift things around. And the possibilities really are endless. And I know that's a hopeful kind of dreamer statement, but Melanie knows me. I'm that type of person. But we also have seen it. We both have been in this work long enough to recognize those important things. I'm as you can tell, I'm quite passionate, Melanie. I will pass it to you to add to that.
Correct.
Well, Susie is a little passionate, you know.
correct. No, no, just one question to that. Okay, Susie, can you say more around? You mentioned briefly that people enter this as if they've already done something wrong. Can you say more on that?
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's so much, as I talked about, noise, right? Where of most likely there's something not going well in the organization. That could be
Right.
from your interviewing practices to how your application looks to pay scales and equity and pay. I mean, we can talk about all different things. So I don't want to discredit that there are things that need improvement. What we want to think about is being stuck in the overwhelm of shame,
Got
because
it.
it could be overwhelm and shame for things that we've personally done or said that we would never do now, knowing what we know, saying, doing, understanding. And it could be business and organizational shame or overwhelm. Oh my goodness, we've been doing this way for 15 years or 10 years or 5 years.
Right.
Wow, we've got it wrong. And what we need to think about is we've got it wrong. We can acknowledge that, or things could be better, or whatever you want to say in the language. And here are the steps we're going to take. Because that's what happens. People get kind of in that overwhelmed shame, and then they tend to pause, stop, not know where to start. And if an organization doesn't have, a DEI position, which we know many don't, and many won't, who can you partner with externally that comes in really unbiased to help the organization? That's a lot of what we do actually, but
Right.
there's people out there, there's groups out there, and that really helps as well to help pinpoint some of those things of, oh my gosh, are we a horrible company or am I a horrible person? Now sometimes there's not great things, and we know that, as I said. Most often, if you have the leadership buy-in, you have some access to resources and time, and that mindset of openness, things will move along and will shift you from that feeling quickly. Melanie, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on it, especially like the hope, open-mindedness. Unfortunately, more recently, diversity, equity, inclusion has gotten a bad name, right?
Yep.
It's
Okay.
been tied to like political agenda, and that's unfortunate because we're talking about people, we're talking about business, how people are treated, and how your business can be successful when you incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion, best practices. Not sure how politics got involved with that because that should be a win-win, right? It should be a win-win that you're incorporating inclusive language so that people feel like they belong, right? You're incorporating really positive methods in order to recruit people from a diverse pool. That should be positive across the board, regardless of politics, right? How do we retain our people? Because we identify microaggressions so people feel like they belong in that organization so that they can see a path to promotion, so that they can feel like, this is where I want to be. I don't want to leave because we know that turnover costs money on that business. It's about 30% of a person's salary to replace them. That's a good business strategy to retain your people. So it's interesting that somehow diversity, equity, inclusion has gotten this bad name in the political realm when it should be a positive outside of any politics. This is just good business.
Got it. Also, Melanie, can you touch upon how, of course, it has gotten a bad name, but it has also gotten some good, right? As in, it has evolved from where it started to where probably it is right now. Can you talk more around how it has evolved over time and how maybe from DEI it is DEIB? Where does that B come from? How is that changing the landscape and the way people perceive these initiatives right now? Also, Susie touched upon that a little bit, but because you're expert consultants in this space, also can you touch upon an organization's readiness to do this? Susie said that you need to have a leadership buy-in, resources allocated, all of that, but typically when would you say that a company is ready, or when would you as consultants want to engage with them, or what are those check boxes that you necessarily need to have, that hey, you know what, this need not be a training exercise, this is how we engage and this is what we expect out of you? how do you check box that organization's readiness before engaging into an assignment with them? I said assignment, but it is not actually an assignment. It is a prolonged thing. It is a cultural change. But yeah, first, if you can talk more around how DEI is changing and has earned a good name as well, and then organizations' readiness to incorporate this.
Well, Susie kind of touched on it with an organization's readiness is it starts from the top, right?
Right.
Because it's not hiring somebody like, okay, now we've checked this box and we
Correct.
have somebody who's overlooking DEI office, or we're going to just throw out a training on inclusive language. No, it's got to be bigger than that. And I'll give you an example. We had a client who, they seemed like they were buying in, and we were doing listening sessions and really talk. They had some issues when it came within the organization with different groups. A lot of the people, they were from different manager levels, different parts of the organization, and we got a lot of feedback on pay inequity, right?
Right.
Gender inequity, racial inequity, racial comments, all of these things. So we're getting this feedback, but then when we went and explained this to the C-suite, to the executive team, the buy-in wasn't there, right? They knew something was wrong, but they weren't willing to put in the investment to really figure out or to deal with the fact that there were real issues within the organization. So, quite frankly, not only have you more frustrated the employees because they're thinking, oh, we're getting this feedback. We're talking to the diversity movement because there's something that's going to happen to make our lives better, to make our work life better, only to hear now we've given this and now our executive team doesn't care because they actually canceled the future discussions, right? And so really that was probably a move that hurt and hindered that organization more because they went the opposite direction, right?
Right.
They wanted to hear it, but they weren't going to do anything about it. So as Susie mentioned before, you have to have buy-in for the top in order for there to be actual change, and not one training, but over years. It has to not be
Right.
that, okay, when we hire, we use diversity, equity, inclusion. It should be that it's woven throughout the organization throughout, right? And otherwise it actually hurts the organization more, and it frustrates the people who work there. Listen, the whole idea of diversity, equity, inclusion is, yes, to better your business, but the reason why it betters your business is because of the people who work for you, who make
Right.
your business better, right? The whole thing is empathy. It's the people who work there want to work harder. They want to be more creative. They feel valued. All of that makes your business better. And if they don't feel that, then they're less likely to bring 100% to the office every day, right? And so it really starts with, how do you value people within your organization? It's a win-win on both sides, right? And so we want to make sure that we have, first of all, the executive team who's fully buying it, not because, oh, this is just going to make my business better, right? Because it will, but also
Right.
because I value the people who work for me.
Correct.
And in turn, they will value the organization and the business. And in turn, my business will thrive because of that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll add a couple things on readiness and then kind of going back to DEIB and kind of the ever evolving acronym and,
Yes.
and different things there. So, the readiness, what we will do more specifically, we hopefully have that buy in, understand where an organization is. So, whether that's somebody external or internal, really doing um, two things. When we do somewhat of an audit sounds so scary and negative, but it's not. But we really look at, what the employee handbook look like, your
Yeah.
policies, access to all different, care, and what's the discrimination policy look like, whether sometimes there are legal implications, that we understand outside of an organization, but usually an organization can state certain things, especially about discrimination, harassment, bullying. So we look at different things like interviewing processes, if there's standardized rubrics that will mitigate bias, for example. So there's the audit, so to speak, is as much in the organization as possible, looking at somebody's website, the language that's used on applications, and then some. If there's a mentorship sponsorship program, and there's so many things. But an organizational assessment, oftentimes people will call that the employee engagement survey that I usually get every year. But ensure that there are some diversity focused questions woven into that. So sometimes it's a separate type of survey. Ours is the organization. We do ask about, do you feel like there's a diverse workforce that you know of? And all employees have access to answer things like this. And then it's about promotions. Do you understand and feel like your salary is equitable? Do you feel like leadership is bought into DEIB or DEI? So there's different types of DEI focused questions to weave into that employee engagement. And then it should be really worked out in a lot of data and insights. Where do you see the greatest areas of strength, and where are there those opportunities? Similar to what Melanie was saying, because not only in the survey, but we do listening sessions, as Melanie said, like a focus group. And we have conversations. So we have the quantitative and qualitative data. And mind you, the data, right, is so important to those executives. The data is important because we know not only how people are feeling, we have those hard facts with numbers that then we can understand what is the whole scope of how people are feeling in this organization. From those insights that we gather, we recommend that you have a plan. What are the goals and actions around these areas of opportunity? That also helps with education. Okay, if we want a session or we want education on DEI, based on what you found, plan the education. A lot more people will want to go. They feel connected to it. They feel seen and heard. If there's a difference that something comes out of that, and people, maybe there is a salary band or scale, and HR, human resources, has that, but it's never been really communicated to the staff. Well, that's an easy win. Oh, here are our salary bands. Here's how we decide on, what is equitable. If you have feedback, let us know. People feel heard. They feel seen. They feel safer in that. So that organizational assessment, engagement, survey, audit, whatever you want to call it, and gaining insight to the real facts, that also really helps with that longevity and what's being woven into, which I love that, Melanie, because it's integration. DEIB is not a separate side plate item. It is on your whole list on your plate. And so that's something else there, and that kind of readiness and how to get there so things make sense. And again, to quiet a lot of that overwhelm. And then lastly, back to DEI and DEIB, so B for belonging. We generally on our team will say that belonging is an outcome of inclusion.
Right.
However, everybody will feel differently about it, and we encourage everybody to feel differently about that because that's what makes us unique. And so really thinking about what acronym would be best for your organization, that also can come from finding out who's in your organization and what's important to them. And making sure that whatever you use, DEIB, some people have A for accessibility or access. Some people put an E for engagement, a second E for engagement. Whatever the acronym is, make sure it's representative of who you are. And actually clearly define diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, and tie it back to who you are. Tie it to your values, tie it to your mission, and have that, we call it a DEI statement, but have that living as a document that's ever evolving, that can be on your website, that's internal, and it makes sense for who you are. Quite often organizations are grabbing something off of the internet and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel right because it's not for the organization. So that's the acronym there. Melanie, did I miss anything with the acronym?
No, you didn't. You described it, explained it really well. Oh, there's a bug right there. Hold on. So weird.
Good. So we talked about the readiness bit, Susie and Melanie, but Melanie, can you also touch upon what could be or maybe in your assignments you've come across very common hurdles that maybe the companies who are doing this for the first time come across, or maybe not the companies coming across, but you as consultants coming across some very common hurdles that, of course, then this is post the exec buy-in of, I am assuming that is already there, but in your engagement while you are at it, what are those very common mistakes or hurdles that you come across that would sort of be an impediment to the true essence of DI getting implemented? If you can touch upon some of those very common mistakes which the companies do or which the execs do, which actually act as bottlenecks.
I think, and I'd love to get Susie's input on this as well. I think the biggest mistake is that there are assumptions, right? There are assumptions that people know what DEI is, right? Or they feel like that somehow, and we hear this often. We hear it's because I won't be able to say what I want to say, or I won't be able to have my opinion anymore, or that, all of these assumptions because they haven't really learned what diversity, equity, inclusion really means, right? And so because of that, they go into it with this very negative attitude, right? And so oftentimes we begin our conversations with, this is not a place of judgment, this is a place of learning, right? And Susie mentioned, this is not a destination. This is a journey. And we're constantly learning, we're constantly evolving. And especially with inclusive language, we are changing all the time on what inclusive language looks like, right?
You're right.
Because we're learning more about each other. And the more we can learn, the more we can expand. We don't want to stop learning, right? We want to continue learning and allow people to feel comfortable enough to express themselves, to say, you know what, that actually makes me uncomfortable. That actually isn't what I want to be called, right? And
Right.
so when we can start to have those conversations, then we can be more empathetic for each other. This isn't about, I want to say what I want to say. And I will just say this, when people say that, I want to ask them, what do you want to say? Right? What is it that you're trying to say that you can't say? And if you feel like it might be offensive to somebody, why do you want to say it?
Correct.
Right? And the biggest thing is, and we talk about this especially with pronouns, like, well, I don't agree with that. There are a lot of things you don't agree with, and that's okay. You
Right.
don't have to agree with everything. But more importantly, how do you want to communicate with people, and how do you want others to feel in that space? Do you want to make them feel that they belong or that they are excluded? It's not about how, if you agree with the pronouns, right? Because you may not, and that's okay. It's okay if you don't. But do you want them to feel like they're excluded or included, right? Independent of how you feel about it, right? Because I may not agree with a lot of things,
Of
right?
course.
But I want my colleague, I want my employees to feel like they're in a safe space. And I
Correct.
think that the first step in that journey is to recognize that we have heavy unconscious bias in everything we
Exactly.
do, right? And I've had people say, well, I don't have unconscious bias. And I want to go like, well, that's amazing because you're the only human on earth that doesn't, right? We all have it. And a
Right.
lot of DEI is self reflection and saying, I can acknowledge that I don't know everything, and that's okay. I can acknowledge that I have biases
That
against
is
other
true.
people, and that's okay.
Yeah.
What am I going to do to mitigate that so that even though I have these unconscious biases, that I'm going to allow my space to be inclusive and for people to belong? So I think the first step is acknowledging that, giving yourself the grace to know that I'm not perfect and I will make mistakes, and allowing other people, giving them the grace to do the same.
Very
Yeah.
true. Very true. Yeah,
Yeah.
Susie.
Uh, there can be quite a few hurdles, and Melanie, I love the specifics of what you shared because when we get into it, right, the specifics, those are what come up, and we have to have And when I say we have to have, we need to, and it's our pleasure to have deeper conversations and to kind of redirect and to ask questions back because it's to help people understand and learn. I think on the broader sense, that, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that organizations, executives, teams wanting things to evolve and change feel like this is going to happen overnight or in 3 months or in 6 months. Now, what I will say is, of course, there will be wins. There will be progress if things are put into place with strategy in mind, with purpose in mind, with the great mindsets, all of what we've discussed thus far. But what happens sometimes is it gets going and it seems like, well, why is this not happening fast enough? We're human
Mhm.
beings. We're all going to be at our own pace and we're handling a lot. And so that's something that can become a hurdle where even when we start, it's not going down. Well, people get a little bit anxious and we need to settle in and we need to recognize that ongoing journey. And I don't mean to be redundant, but that really does come up as something that it pops up every so often. And then alongside that, if there is a DEI leader, one person, two people, quite often it's not a large office. It depends on the organization. Sometimes there are large DEI offices, and especially in global organizations. A lot of times we're seeing one person, two people, and they have everything on them, which really, in how it's set up in the structure, will never be successful. A lot of this is about that collaboration. The DEI position should be in regular partnership and communication with the executives. They should have a direct line to those executives, a direct line to the human resources department. And what we know is a lot of the DEI positions are housed within HR. It's not the worst thing. However, we would like to see it extracted out because that can become a hurdle where it's seen as an HR function and that's part of the function of DEI. We want to think about the direct line to marketing. Every business unit, there should be regular check ins and communication and collaboration. And so, what happens quite often, which becomes a hurdle, the pressure, the unrealistic expectations put on these DEI leaders. We feel for these people. I mean, some of us have been in that position before as well, but we really see, okay, we need to give people time and resources and support and collaboration, communication to be able to do their job. And sometimes DEI leaders become the HR office where grievances come. Well, grievances can come to a DEI position. However, is it actually an HR situation? So those are some of the specifics, but I think that the buy-in, the commitment, really we need to have a pulse check every so often of are we still okay? Where are we
Yeah.
feeling? And that's also why it's important to report out on the small wins. Report out on those small wins, report out on the things that are not going well. It's not going to go well all the time. And how are you going to fix it? What are you going to try next? Because a lot of times you have to pilot something and then think about how you correct. And so that's that documentation, that's that data support, that's the all of what I had previously said. So how to get over those hurdles. But I wanted to back up to that broad sense even because, and then combine with what Melanie you've talked about, those those are things we see most commonly, I would say.
Got this is slightly off topic, but uh no, there has been this conversation, and I'm sure this is in the West as well, that usually smaller teams, let's talk about, say, early stage or mid stage startups, which are 100 to 7 800 or 1,000 people strong, right? And there are quite a few, there's so many companies that fall in this range of 100 people strong to 1,000 people strong. And we've had these conversations with respect to reward offices, that okay, you know such small companies may not be able to sort of afford. So I honestly don't feel that they cannot afford, because it is not really a cost center, it is actually a growth center. But uh, the common term is that because we'll not be able to afford class professionals in house, right? Those projects take a back seat, right? Those are never discussed. I'm sure you would come across situations where companies which are of these size don't even discuss this topic, because they do not have the luxury, affordability, or the mind share right, to start focusing on this, which is why I've started seeing this, that rewards offices at times in India are outsourced to consultants, as in, you know uh, because they cannot afford the specialists full time. There is a dedicated office that takes care of this. It happens a lot with legal, as in you would not have an in-house huge legal team, right? You would outsource that to a legal consult. Similarly, what is your take on, if this were to drill down to so many companies who house 70% of the workforce, right? There's a limited audience that is working for companies above 1,000 in employee strength. If this were to truly democratize its access, when I say this, I mean the DI practices, do you think it makes sense to also have this initiative not specifically done in house, but also to have this more of as an external partnership that runs throughout? It is not a one time exercise, not a two time exercise. It is something that you partner with your legal on a retainer, right? For example, it is an ongoing commitment. You never let go of that engagement with your legal. Similarly, do you think this should shape up in that direction versus doing a one time effort? Your take, and both you and
Yeah.
Melanie, Susie. Yeah, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Susie.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate that you brought that up because we want to make sure that we are speaking to as wide of an audience as possible. And to your point, this type of size of business makes up a
Right.
huge part of our global workforce and really is only growing, as well. So there's a few things. Yes, if there's an opportunity for then something to be partnered, that's we have a lot of organizations that don't have an in-house DEI position, but we have long-term partnerships and we're their trusted people, just like you said, like their legal team. They'll call us, or we have certain projects we'll do. So it's not it is a productive thing, I will say, to have that strategic partner, somebody that you trust and somebody that aligns with your values and your mission of the business that you're growing. And that's really important. And to understand that whoever you partnership can meet your needs, even the needs that you don't know at this stage, that will help you. And that's really important when looking for partners in this space to make sure that there is a wide variety of experience, approaches, offerings, services, because that will help this small group, get the most out of that investment if they are partnering with somebody. And that's just a little toolkit tip to make sure, to ask good questions to those people that you want to partner with. Now, thinking about somebody that is a founder, a company of 1 to 5 to 1,000. And Melanie, you mentioned this earlier and how we think about this. DEI is the lens in which you operate from the very beginning. Now, that's a lot to put on somebody when maybe they don't have the scope of experience or work. That's okay. To me, right, and this is an opinion-based statement, it's almost as if in this day and age that if you are a founder, you are growing an organization, you recognize you need to do your work as a leader to lead inclusively. So inclusive leadership, what is that? How do you operate from how you write your mission and your values and how you ground your starting operations as you grow? That will give as part of your foundation work. And even if
Correct.
it's established and it's small, there are things that's okay if there's not a full-time person. What resources can you bring in? What partners can you bring in?
Correct.
Could you start a committee or council that helps with the charge? There's a lot of different options where you can create a lot of impact and progress without that position, right? And
Yes.
that's what we want to make sure people understand. And it's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to have a partnership, and it's okay to tap your leaders inside the organization as you grow, because there's a lot of people out there that are passionate about this work. Mel?
No, I agree, Susie. And the thing is, and it doesn't have to be this big production, as Susie mentioned,
Right.
right? It should be woven throughout so that it isn't a big production, right? It's just the way you operate, from the inclusive language to the recruiting to your supplier diversity to, do you have, you know, what does the diversity look like throughout your organization? Gender diversity, pay equity. Those are just foundational practices that will make your organization, a DEIB champion without needing to make it so that we have to have this big office or a partnership. Yes, we love to partner. We partner with clients that have a DEI office and those who don't, right, with their HR department. But what's important is that it's something that's woven throughout that organization from start to finish. We have a lot of organizations that, are struggling with diversity in house. They don't have enough people from the BIPOC community, like African Americans, people of color, Asian, Indian, all of those different traditionally underrepresented communities,
Right.
but what are they doing about it, right? Are they reaching out to certain organizations that specifically, that specifically are looking for like a different diverse candidate pipeline, right? Do they have diverse panel of interviewers? Are they developing partnerships with minority serving institutions or professional organizations and associations? Like all of that matters. And are they being very intentional with that? Those are things that you can do um, throughout your organization without feeling like you have to have an office to do that.
That's right.
Got it. Got it. We're almost time. We had an extremely riveting conversation, and yeah. So that's all. Thank you so much for joining.